how to host the
Oh,
discussion.
okay. Well, I just have to, now that I'm past with the, oh gosh, I'm gonna pull over for a minute since the traffic is now speeding up. We had a lane merger as I'm driving, and so I was like, oh, how opportune for me to be able to um, record this call. All right, bear with me. Back to meeting and technical difficulties. Please stand by. I will edit out this part. Oh, Jeff Bennett, would you like to be host? I don't care.
I was waiting for you to do that.
I was
Sure.
going to make Lauren the host, but officially you should be host.
Oh, you mean as far as Zoom protocols?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. All
I'm
right,
just
Lauren, you're
having
off the hook.
a tough
Okay.
time trying to get the agenda updated with today's.
All right. I'm back
Are
to
you
driving.
driving?
Yes, and then I'm going to go on mute. So welcome everybody, and and here you go. Like everybody, zoom away.
You know what? I'm just not going to worry about this table structure. It's just too much of a pain. Agenda.
Lauren, do you want to tell people about the upcoming summit while Jeff is getting all that together, please?
Hi all, I'll do my best. It's not my main project, but I'm happy to give a little bit of an update. So I'm Lauren Higgins. I work with the Kauffman Foundation, and I work on the playbook effort and other ecosystem learning efforts to help ecosystem building practitioners learn from one another. And we are and have been retooling and reorganizing and rescheduling because of COVID in terms of when we would host the 2020 ESHIP Summit. What I can tell you now is I'll put the dates in the chat, but it will be upcoming here in September. Maybe, Cecilia, if you know the dates off the top of your head, you can share those.
Yes, it's the 15th and 16th of September, and then there was an added day on the 29th. This is like a big preview. So the 15th and 16th, we'll be talking about ecosystem building. And then the 29th, which we're kind of labeling field day, is more about building the ecosystem. So more tangible, hands-on ecosystem building. So it's definitely a lot of group designing and discussing of what the field of ecosystem building will look like.
So the first few days they're there on the 15th and 16th. It'll be a very wide audience. It'll be bigger than we've normally been able to reach because it will be virtual, and we'll be focusing on hopefully reaching a broader audience to talk about what is ecosystem building, what is the state of entrepreneurship right now, and then particularly looking at how ecosystem building can be a response to the time, or is a response to the time that we're in, as well as with COVID and economic recovery, as well as with issues of economic inclusion, which are so critical at this moment. And that'll be the first day. And then on the 16th, the event will focus more on specific cases and stories about cities that are building their local entrepreneurial ecosystems. And so learning about the variety of different cases and cities that are doing that work, so that you get, as a practitioner, a wide variety of understanding and examples of how this work is being done, so that you can learn and connect with people who are also doing this work in a variety of ways and contexts, from rural to very urban. And then I would say that the other event that Cecilia mentioned will be a event for those folks who have been very committed to this goal work, as is related to this goal call, and who are really focused on what will it take to further develop the goals and the profession of ecosystem building, so the field level work, right, that we have been primarily discussing over the last few years of the ESHIP Summit. but won't be discussed as much during the main portion of the summit on those first 2 days this year. So that field work will have its own time a little bit later in September, because it's very important, and we don't want to confuse it with the broader audience who are just trying to get their head around how does ecosystem building work, what are examples of it, and meeting other people who are doing it in different cities and contexts. So that's what's up with the summit. I'm sure you'll all get an email with more details and how to register soon enough.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to get back in gear as I'm hitting the road. And before I turn it over to Jeff to lead us in a discussion of communication tools, let me set up the premise of why and introduce a check-in question. So one of the things that we've realized is that as we're discussing more about projects and such and building this community, some of the things that happen around connected networks is the need for communication and communication tools as a whole. I think that this group is actually outgrowing Slack. Facebook is good for some communication, but it doesn't really give us an opportunity to delve a little bit deeper. We've talked about hive mind, discourse as opposed to Discord, wiki as an information gathering knowledge repository. But personally, I long for more of an old school forum where there are different topics and things that can be pinned. So we thought what we would do today is use the ESHIP goals community as a case study and talk about communications. What is it that we need, and what is it that how do we find that? Or is there a tool out there? Or is there something like an Airtable directory, but can be fulfilling, like you can fill it out yourself and get into the community and such. So before we do that, normally what we do is a check-in question. Our check-in questions are usually more about who you are and not necessarily just what you do. And because I'm on a road trip, I'm going to ask you, and when we do a check-in question, after you answer the question, we'd like you to call on the next person. So my question to you is what is your most interesting detour that you've ever taken on a road trip? So did you stop at a historical marker or something like that? And I'll tell you that as I checked off the last of my 4 states, I was driving around, and for some reason I backtracked and went to Devil's Tower. And if you've ever seen Devil's Tower, like back in the day in the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there's this huge mountain of rock that is in the middle of nothing. And I ended up sleeping at a teepee, which you can actually rent on Airbnb, at the base of Devil's Tower. And now I know the woman, Juliana, who runs it. So if you ever want to go, there's a teepee with your name on it. So so Devil's Tower, sleeping in a teepee was my road trip unexpected pleasure. And Grant, I'm going to call on you.
Hey, good afternoon, at least here in the Midwest in Indiana. My most interesting detour on a road trip had to have been in Manhattan, Kansas. I was on my way to Boulder from South Bend, and on the map it came up that Manhattan, Kansas was just a couple miles off the road I was on. A couple friends who lived in Manhattan, New York at the time received a postcard from me where I had written out the postcard, and then I probably scared the postal lady, but she was very nice and cooperative and helpful, so that when she on the postcard did her round stamp, I asked her to turn it so that Manhattan, Kansas was very visible and legible, so that when they received it in Manhattan, they received a letter or a postcard from Manhattan in Manhattan. So not planned, random detour, definitely did it, got back on the highway and just kept going. It was fun. It's just a random thing. Popcorn Lisa.
Okay. An actual detour. My road trips are usually very meandering, so I would have to say at the last minute, I was driving from Dallas, Texas to Phoenix, Arizona, and I decided to stop at Meteor Crater because why not? And I guess that really is a detour because that's pretty much the other side of Arizona. And yeah, it was a great day. I'd actually been there before once when I was a child, but it's very eerily quiet there. But definitely go. I always tell people check that out. It's a really beautiful place. So I guess Jessie.
Hi, I'm Jessie. I am new here. I think I'm the only one new here, I guess.
No, I'm new too.
Oh, okay. Good to know. So I cannot think of a physical detour right now because no trip this year. I would say that coming to my mind right now is when I'm on the internet, I always get into some rabbit holes and then a lot of detour, and then I think, what am I doing here? And then I come back to the original search, and that's why I found ESHIP, I think. And this, because I come from industry side, I'm not coming from startup, like entrepreneur ecosystem. I also chair in IEEE community, so I want to learn, learn how to run, how to cultivate a community from you. And so we are industry focused. As you might know, IEEE is the engineering community. So an industry is an ecosystem. It's not a local ecosystem, but it's a global ecosystem, and focusing on industry. But it should include startup to have innovation, to have new momentum, right? So what caught my interest of this group meeting is the topic is called connected networks. And what I'm thinking is I see a lot of networks right now. Actually, everyone is a network, but these networks are not connected. So I like to learn more about what's your idea, how to connect networks. Maybe I speak too much, so I should pick next one, right? How about Richard?
Thanks, Jesse. Most interesting detour. So I was Thanksgiving week 2017. I was in Northern Ireland filming some hockey tournaments, and we drove from Belfast up to Giant's Causeway. And on the way there, we just randomly stopped at some castles that were like castle ruins or something because we found it. And I was driving on the wrong side of the car on the wrong side of the road doing a roundabout the wrong way. So has to be the castles that we randomly found on our way up to the shore in Northern Ireland. So that's fun. I'm gonna throw it over to Jeff.
Okay, thank you. So the only one I can even think of is driving home. My family's all in Reno, Nevada, and I was living in Seattle at the time. And driving home from the holidays, I took a detour from I-5 northbound and just decided to go over to the Oregon coast and drive along the Oregon coast. No castles or anything like that, unfortunately. So nothing quite as interesting as the island trip. But that's the only one I can think of. And I think we have left, is it just you, Lauren, or?
I guess it is. I'm really trying to I'm drawing a blank. I was laughing at Jesse. Jesse, you gave such a good example. Those are my most common detours every day on the internet. I have too many tabs open. Honestly, I guess I don't even think of that. I guess I flow so much with travel that I can't even think of a story where I felt like it was particularly out of the way. Although I guess I'll give one example. One time, I think that we were trying to get home from New Mexico when I lived in Colorado, but we decided to stop at this place called the Dwan Lake Sanctuary, which is in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and you can't see it from the road. And it's by this Universal World College, which is also a really wild name. And it looks like the Hogwarts school, this place does. And so you're like driving in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and there's this crazy looking, wild looking school. And then there's this light sanctuary. But what this architect did is that they put all of these prisms that are filled with water. And so the entire inside of this sanctuary, which is it's basically like a very peaceful meditation or quiet space, but it's full of rainbows. And so it's really cool. It's just like full on rainbow light. And it was a really interesting experience that I didn't know was sitting in the middle of the desert there. So if you're ever in Las Vegas, New Mexico.
So just wanted to check, did everybody get a chance to go? I think so. If not.
Yeah, I don't know because I can't see everybody,
I
but
know.
I'm so glad that everybody shared that. Now we have more destinations, including the online detours. So thank you. All right, Jeff.
So it occurs to me that there's actually, I think 3 people here who this might be the first, or maybe even 4. This might be the first Goal 4 call. I think Jesse and Lisa and Grant, is this your first Goal 4 call for all of you? Yes, no?
I've been on quite a few ESHIP calls.
Okay,
over the
others
years.
besides Goal 4, okay.
Just jump in when, yeah.
Okay. So I'm wondering if maybe a good idea might be to just do a real brief, provide some context about Goal 4, where things are at. Would that help before diving into the topic? Yes, I see a couple heads, nods, and thumbs up. So I pasted into the chat window, there's an ESHIP goals dashboard that has a page for each of the goals. And you can see kind of the high level overview description of the goal that came out of the Kaufman Foundation, probably in like 2018 summit, I think it was. And so for Goal 4, it's really Connected Networks. Goal 4 is really about connecting ecosystem builders and NRPs, national resource providers, across the field. So not necessarily just in your own ecosystem, but say me connecting with you guys in your disparate organizations or communities, and Norris in Boise, Idaho, and somebody in Albany, New York, and wherever. So it's ecosystem builders connecting with ecosystem builders across the world, really, and sharing best practices and whatnot. There's some initiatives that are under that, which I won't go into now because today's discussion is really kind of, well, I guess it is kind of more about 4.3, which is new communication channels. Since ESHIP I don't know, Cecilia, when did the Facebook page start? The ESHIP Facebook page.
So the ESHIP Facebook page actually came around about 2018. So for those of you who are new to all of this, back in 2017, the ESHIP Summit was a convening that the Kaufman Foundation had sent out invitations to people who work with entrepreneurs, but were the connectors and the people that were helping to support entrepreneurship in their custom and bespoke ways. And the reason that maybe drew you to this call and this work was that there's some other nuanced thing that you do in addition to the things that you do. So whether you run, whether you're part of an engineering community, or you run a co-working space or an incubator and accelerator, there's some additional systems level thinking that you're probably prone to. You tend to be the person that connects the people that don't know each other because it would be for their benefit, that kind of thing. And the Kauffman Foundation's mission has always been to support entrepreneurship among the other things that they do. And they realized that with these ecosystem builders, they could exponentially support entrepreneurship because each ecosystem builder connects and supports more than one entrepreneur. So in 2017, there was an invitation for people to come together and discuss this. And then out of that evolved some ideas of things that we would need for a professional field of ecosystem building. And this professional field would need things like, it would need inclusivity. We should have some kind of shared mission. There should be some shared metrics or practical metrics. There should be some kind of universal messaging and sustainable work. And there should be probably some culture that goes along with that, some collaborative culture. And then one of the other things that came out was that we should be connected, because the challenge has always been that there's people in silos. And personally, I don't know that there's a problem with the silos. The silos seem to be a place where you can laser focus and get stuff done. The problem is that there's no communication between the silos. So we need some permeating and some connecting so that you can see what other people are doing, so that it influences your work. Not that you want to duplicate effort or step on each other's territory, but if we can get better communication between the silos, then we can actually help and create a more robust environment. So that's basically what Connected Networks is about. And out of that notion that we should have better connected networks are these things called initiatives or goal projects. And goal projects being that there should be some universal body, kind of like a UN of ecosystem building, so that we all get along and know about each other. There should be some standards and a communication tool. So that's what all those initiatives are some form of, if we had this, then we could actually actualize the goal. So think about those ESHIP goals kind of like UN sustainable goals. And under each UN sustainable goal, if you worked on one project or thing, it would just move that field goal forward. So, so basically ESHIP goals are sustainable goals of ecosystem building. Hopefully that gives you a brief, very Reader's Digest version of the work that's been going on in the past couple of years. So how'd I do, Jeff?
Great. So yeah, I forgot to even back up even further in case anybody hasn't been to an ESHIP summit. Has everybody been to an ESHIP summit before? Yes, no? Richard has not. Melissa? No. Jesse? No. Grant?
Yeah, so Grant but I know Richard is from the 1 Million Cups community. And Richard and Grant are also from the Startup Weekend community. And Lisa, I know that we've run across each other somewhere before, but
you did a presentation last month that I attended, which is how I ended up
thank
here.
you. So that's the Startup Commons conversation, and I think Jesse, maybe that's also where you learned about ESHIP goals.
Yeah. I have been in your webinar. Yes.
Perfect. So that's it. So they've had that thing, because that's basically what I said, maybe a little bit more eloquently, I hope.
Awesome. Well, so this is great. We need to get them plugged into, I know, Cecilia, you were working with others on introducing people to eShip, so definitely need to get these guys plugged into that. But first, welcome. I didn't realize that we had such new blood. So getting back to the purpose or the agenda of this specific today's call, And it was really about what platforms, talking about platforms we can use to connect ecosystem builders working across the world. And there's several out there that have emerged since the ESHIP Summit. There's a couple on Facebook. The Kauffman Foundation set up an ESHIP community page, which is a private group, which you can join, and we can share the link in the chat if that helps. There's also an open page called Ecosystems Unite that a lot of people use. It's grown since COVID to, I don't know, a few hundred ecosystem builders in that one. There's a Slack channel that the ESHIP community uses, which part of the agenda for this call originated because we feel like we're kind of outgrowing Slack. It's got its good points and bad points, so we wanted to talk about maybe exploring, as Cecilia said, some other options like forums, old-fashioned forums like Discourse, or there's a new one that we've been using, another group that just started last week called, well, the platform's Mighty Networks. There's everybody know who Brad Feld is? Yes, no, wrote the, what many consider the Bible of ecosystem building. He's got a group called Startup Communities, which is an open community. It's over like 1,300 people now, just in the last week or so that it started. So it's a network, it's a platform where you can go and you can sign up and basically interact digitally, take some detours like Jesse said, some rabbit holes on the internet, and go down and explore different topics and chat with other ecosystem builders around the world about growing startup communities. So I think that's the context, I guess.
So how about if we pose some questions about the challenges? So maybe not necessarily because everybody else is pretty new to this community. So let's say whatever community that you're in, just to pose an open question out there, what are the challenges that you see with technology? Like, what are the problems that you're trying to solve for communication tools? There are some that are really good at sending quick messages, but then you can't find when a discussion's been talked about before. So you feel like you're always going to feel like you're new to the community because you can't find the old conversations, and then you get dismissed by people that say, oh, we already talked about that. Like, we already solved that, you know, and we want to make sure that we come up with things. So that's just for me, in my experience, some of the challenges of communication tools around emerging communities. What are you finding as, and Jeff and I have done a fair deal of talking. So I want to ask all of you, you know, just to chime in and say, so in your communities, what are your pain points around communication?
I wonder if, in addition to maybe hearing people's reflections, but if we can also just try to, in addition to that, solve for or get closer to the particular issue at hand around that, where the goal community is outgrowing, or the current community is outgrowing the platform. So I guess, you know, to kind of maybe answer both in one shot. So to Cecilia's point, I think this is a natural challenge for all networks and communities. They start off slower and informal, and then they need more structured communication spaces to share more robust information. So it makes sense that this is happening. A lot of the things that have already been shared, whether it would be an old school forum or wikis, or more formal learning platforms, things like that, or Slack. I've used all of those, and it really depends on the needs of the group and the needs of the depth of communication and the frequency of communication. And I think what I'm curious about is kind of understanding more about the challenge right now, that the pain point that is being shared, you know, and I would be curious to know For example, what would it look like to join up with that Mighty Networks group that's already there? Would that already serve our needs? I'm also because I'm skeptical of creating too many multiple channels if the idea is to create a broad space where many practitioners can interact. Then I think if that's already just been created and people took initiative there, I'd be curious if it's just about us going there to this Mighty Network space that you talked about, and what might be the pros and cons of that. To me, that'd be a really tangible conversation, and it might show us if that would meet our needs or not, and how we would be able to see this with the broader community. Anyway, just a few thoughts from my end.
I'd love to jump in. When Brad shared out the Mighty Networks, I joined in, and over the past week, I've had some already on his Mighty Networks platform. You know, there's always, as we all know, that beginning stage of what is this platform, how does it work, what are its pro cons, and getting to know it. There's some great opportunities to share videos and text and audio on the platform. And then they've done some interesting things on geographic areas and then topical areas so that you can join into the conversation and respond back with polls or posing questions. And then it seems like there's going to be some regular recurring webinars or live sessions where the chat will come on and you can join in on the conversation, join in on the chat, and be a part of that rather than just, we're going to run this webinar and give you all of our, expertise nuggets. It seems more like the Mighty Networks is structured in a way where when you have events, it's to bring people together, not to tell everyone you're expert, your know-all kind of knowledge. So I like it for that. I had to turn off emails. I got way too many emails, so I had to turn off the emails. And I wanted to point out one thing about Networks Online over the past 4 or 5 months. I've been concerned about folks wanting services to solve problems that they're not going to solve. Like that whole idea, Cecilia, of if a conversation's already happened and someone starts that same conversation, kind of mitigating that, that doesn't happen in the real world. Open air and physical space doesn't do that either. That's part of our job. People oftentimes probably in a room, probably in a presentation, or even in a workshop, are having the same conversation all over the room. And physical air and physical space doesn't pull those together unless someone is actively doing that in open air, right? So if we require a computer system to do what air doesn't do, like we didn't have that to begin with. So continuing to get into these places where, well, what system's going to solve that for us? I keep saying, well, like, let that be what we do. Like the system can facilitate so much. It can facilitate a conversation. It can track polling. It can bring about metrics. At the end of the day, when there's a conversation over here and that same thing over here, we have to do this. And maybe a computer can help us do that, but we still have to be the ones doing that. So that's kind of been my feedback the past few months of people looking for a smoking gun service.
Yeah, I think that that's an unrealistic expectation. And it's actually, I think, number one, redundancy is not always bad. Number two, it's a great, it is a responsibility of a community manager, especially a virtual community manager, to create coherence and connect the dots between conversations that are happening in one part of your community or one part of your forum, which is why I asked who is moderating and curating that space. And it sounds like, from what Jeff said, that there's a dedicated team, I guess paid or something.
I don't know if they're paid.
Feld. Anyway, I guess I was curious if there were people who were curating it. I was also curious on your experience there. Can people propose other channels? So for example, if all of our activity wanted to move over there, could we have our own cluster inside of that environment?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's actually, and help me out here, Grant. There's actually a topic-focused kind of taxonomy of things. So they have different topics that might be of interest, and then they have circles, which many people have broken down geographically. But I
Exactly.
think it would fit into one of those two, or maybe even both. I've seen an ecosystem builder circle and an ecosystem builder topic, which is kind of weird because I think that's what the whole channel should be about. But yeah, I think you could do ESHIP goal 1 as a topic, for example, or ESHIP goal whatever as a topic, and migrate that all there if you wanted to. I think it would probably be a good idea to have a conversation with the moderators of the forum and make sure that's kosher first.
So that's a challenge when it comes to self-organizing communities, which eShip is a little bit more like. So that when it's, so the challenge is support and curation, right? So what moderators do and the culture that it's set up. So all of those things. I mean, and I don't think that, Grant, I appreciate your view about that conversation coming up. I think that what I crave from old school networks is when you used to be able to search and then follow the thread, and you can still contribute to it, but there could be some kind of foundational knowledge or things that keep getting passed on, and then that can morph and merge and evolve as it should. So I think that's the part that I'm curious about. I'm curious to hear from Jesse and Lisa, because you're you kind of stepped into a community. What is it that you would want to know about this community, or where would you like to? I don't know what you've seen of the goal work, whether it's the dashboard or the Facebook page or Slack, to see, what is it that you saw that was helpful, and what is it that needed to be there? Like, what did you miss?
I'm not. So I went through the dashboard and through all of the goals. And I think a lot of it is just, that basic, what happened before. And yes, there are all the recordings from the previous calls, but that's just the calls. I guess, does that make sense? It's obviously this isn't the only thing. This can't be the only time all month that these goals are worked on. So, it's tracking everything down. There's not, I guess, a roadmap to try to be more prepared for, what has and hasn't been covered, because there's some over here and there's some over here. So, almost a roadmap of sorts, like this is, here are the calls, and then, suggested reading, I guess, might be my input on that. So that it's all more linked together, and that you're not just, okay, well, I read that over there. Now let me go scroll through a Slack channel and see what I can find there.
It's definitely helpful to know. What about you, Jesse?
I am curious about, yes, Cecilia, you mentioned communication between silos, and I'm curious about how are you doing that right now? Because very, very often I saw a lot of startups, they are doing something actually already had been done elsewhere, just they don't know. So this kind of connectivity between ecosystems, communication is one way. Communication is only one way. The other way is the global database. Is there a global database about a certain industry that is in, and the startup can, when he's doing something, he can get the insight and don't reinvent the wheel. And maybe a startup in the ecosystem could find someone in another city to collaborate on. Now, remote working is a new normal, right? So everybody can accept that. So back to your question is how to make this kind of connectivity possible.
Hey, Cecilia, does that, I think that what she's saying there may overlap a little bit with what you have been championing with the greater than the sum app and connections via that. You want to talk about that maybe?
Yeah, so one of the things that I stumbled upon through Network Weavers is an app called Greater Than the Sum, and it's a buddy to Kumu. So if you're familiar with Kumu, which is a mapping system, but this social mapping, it gives you the opportunity to use filters on the social map. So that it's a visual representation of the connections with groups or people, and you can filter it. So so Jeff and a couple of others of us are going to explore what that would look like, because for some people it's a visual thing, right? For some people they're able to go through a database and cull the information themselves because they know the search words that they want to use. But some people need more of a visual representation. So I will be happy to share that when we beta it and see what all of you think about it. Hopefully in the next month or so, we'll have a prototype of what this could look like. Richard, you work in a lot of different communities, and you're scrappy entrepreneur person. So how do you know when something's been done or not done before? Or how do you approach Jesse's problem?
I don't know if there's a good way to know if something's been done or not done before, unless you're plugged in and connected to that community, right? Locally here in the capital region, we have a umbrella organization called Innovate 518 that kind of tries to bring everyone to the table, but there's still lapses in communication. And they've tried to put together a platform to kind of track startups that are in the ecosystem and companies and organizations and programs, but there's not a ton of buy-in and no one's using it. So there's also this unwillingness to put in the work and put in the time to track everything and to communicate, which I find weird. So no, I don't have a good answer to that one. And so unless you're in the thick of it.
It sounds, go ahead, Lauren.
Okay, thanks. Jesse, one thing that comes to mind is it's often challenging from a data perspective to do this kind of connecting work. So many, and I don't know if there are a lot of very good lasting examples of people or communities or cities that have created these types of maps or networks that really facilitate long-term connections. But I think I understand what you're talking about in terms of helping the entrepreneurial community or individual entrepreneurs see and have visibility into what's happening in the industries in their area or relevant industries around the world, so that they can plug in and learn with industry experts and innovate with them. And in terms of connecting networks, all I can offer right now is, in a different conversation, not related to entrepreneurship, but in a different conversation related to connecting change-making networks. What that group is focusing on is looking at the people who are the network leaders,
Mhm.
and connecting them together. So for example, in your case, it wouldn't be so much about a technological solution or necessarily a communication solution or a data solution. It would be maybe identifying people in industry and people in startup community who are the network leaders, and connecting the network leaders and understanding how they can enhance each other's networks. And so it's about really working with the humans who are developing these networks, versus taking a structure first approach. It's more of a relationship first approach. And that's been more how we're thinking about weaving or crossing these networks and getting them to talk to each other more, because we found that the heavy data approach is overwhelming. Sometimes we don't sustain it. It feels maybe cryptic. And also different networks seem to have different language about how they talk about what's valuable to them. And so in order to reduce complexity, we have been focusing on, like maybe in your case, bringing network leaders and industry together with startup network leaders to talk about where they see the intersections and value and start creating the connections that way between those network leaders.
That's a very good sum up. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I like the answer. Well, just one little thing to add is you talk about the database is overwhelming. I agree, but now it's possible to use machine to digest those and to put up some pattern that human can read, such as like a social network analysis, social SNA, social network analytics, or knowledge graph. Yes, I know this is like a still a distant goal, yeah, but it's possible.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that it's maybe like walking two roads at the same time. Like if we wait for the analytics and the data, it might be a long time before we connect the networks. But I think we can be connecting the people, building those relationships. And then as the experts in data or researchers or academics who have the expertise to do that, like I don't have the expertise to do what you just said. I don't know how to work with data that way, but I do know networks and structuring networks and working with people. And so I wouldn't even be able to do what you proposed. So I guess in a way, what I was sharing has been kind of what is the most immediate way to make those connections. But I agree, what you said can be a complement to that, and having that data can really enrich those connections if we get it. Yeah, that's really, thank you.
Lauren and Jesse, I want to add a quick story. No matter how many cities I go to, this conversation always comes up of how they ask me how do they connect their city or area, just like you're asking, Jesse. And my first time in at Boulder Startup Week in 2010, I went to a coffee shop to a morning meetup and stood at the counter, and it was super full. I literally knew no one, and there was someone giving a talk at the front, and we're all listening, right? And I stood next to someone who saw that I had my notebook out, right? And my pen and my notebook to take notes. And she grabbed my notebook and my pen. I don't know this person, right? Literally grabbed my notebook and my pen, and she wrote down Twitter handles and handed it back to me and said, you need to follow these people. I tell that story no matter what community I go to, because not only was there a meetup and I got up and I went, and the organizers organized it, and someone standing at the front, had she not grabbed my notebook and made me follow these people, I wouldn't have known. I could have searched on Twitter for who has a Twitter handle in that city, but which ones do I follow? She wrote down the ones I need to follow so that I can find out what to go do. And that far and away was the most helpful.
I think
That's
it goes back to
identifying-
people. Yes.
Yeah, that's like in using Victor Wong's terminology in the rainforest, identifying the keystones in that community.
It's
Yeah.
the guides. It's and that's what Lisa was talking about, right? There should be some kind of guide or roadmap or person. And Richard, I think coming back to your point, my friends at Mozilla always say that they're always looking for the least tech solution, because technology was created to assist people, and now it seems like it's the other way around, and they find something very wrong in that equation. So I'd ask them, like, why don't we get Slack and LinkedIn and Facebook and all of that to kind of connect? And they said, because it's all proprietary information, and unless there's a merger, they don't want you using the other platform. So on a profit scale, like capitalistic view, there's no reason for those communications tools to talk to each other. So, and at the end of the day, it's the people that sit in the center of those concentric circles that are the connectors. So those are your ecosystem builders. Those are, so at least it's an affirming reason why we all exist and do this work. So in the past, hour or so, we've gotten back to it's about people and relationships. So that helps. I think we'll still work on the other tools to figure out how we can connect better, and but that's what I'm walking away from this conversation thinking. Okay, so we'll still work on relationships and we'll focus on people, because Richard, I don't think people do it unless if they get paid to do something else, even if it benefits to a point, unless somebody takes the initiative, it won't happen because they're paid to do other things. So
Cecilia, I have a quick question.
yes.
So I wonder if, I feel like there were a number of conversations throughout our conversation today, within this one conversation. And I wonder, related to sort of the first point that Jeff brought up in terms of and the tension that you brought up about kind of the goal work is outgrowing Slack. I wonder if in many ways that would be a better conversation for the ESHIP champion to have first, just to kind of get clear on some pros and cons of some different platforms. Because what I can imagine is if that group got clearer together about where they wanted to go and grow the conversation just for this work, then I would imagine that it would clarify how, in addition to that platform that's chosen, where other conversations could start up, for example, how this group should show up on the Bradfeld platform, and what's distinct from showing up and discussing the ESHIP goals there versus what we're working on with the goal champions and everyone attending these goal calls is working on. Anyway, I just think that there's more opportunity for very specific functional discussion about that, and I wonder that if this goal call is exactly the best place for it, or if it might get more traction within that group.
I think you're right. I mean, for those of you who don't know, ESHIP champions are people like Jeff who have kind of raised their hand and been involved organizationally for, Jeff for the past year and a half to help facilitate and kind of assist us assist Christine and I as ESHIP community activators in supporting all of you who are part of the community, because it's not that it's a lot of work, but there's a lot of you, and having ESHIP champions who have probably thought about and brought a lot more clarity and informed points of view to the work that we've been doing. So yes, it would make sense for the people who have thought about it a long time, particularly for this community, to maybe put a little bit more frame into that. But I appreciate all of you in coming in and you know, like, working around the messiness that is ecosystem building sometimes, and to bring your points of view, because it's all of that together which gets us a little bit further in clarity. So thank you for that. Sometimes the calls are a little bit more problem solving focus, and sometimes the goals are a little more discussion focused. Depends on the
Cecilia, I think you're breaking up.
Pennsylvania.
Of your hour, get to know your perspective.
We didn't catch most of that. At least I didn't anyway, Cecilia.
Oh, sorry. Yes, it's Pennsylvania and it's the mountain. So I appreciate all of your time and energy.
All right, you just trying to close this off? Is that?
Yes,
Okay,
and to hear that Lauren, yes, and Lauren's right. We'll work on ESHIP champions. I was trying to explain who ESHIP champions.
Oh yeah, we got that part.
We got that part, yeah.
Okay.
Right,
All right,
so
yeah,
as
so.
the pseudo goal for host, I will thank you all for your attendance today, and hopefully you got something out of it. And feel free to join the Slack channel, which is available on that dashboard that I shared. And hopefully we'll see you on a future call. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.